everybody. Chris Moore here, along with Bob Morrison, our superintendent. We're just kind of going over some talking points, things taking place now in the district. Of course, it's a new year. With that comes new resolutions, and it's the latter part of January. We're kind of early into the new year, so I think most folks are sticking to their resolutions to this point. Did you have any that you've brought into the fray?
I only had one, and about 4 or 5 years ago I had written a book, and I was in the process of editing it, and I kind of put it on the shelf, and so I took it back off the shelf and I started editing it again. So maybe in the next couple months I'll be finished with that.
You want me to proofread it for you?
Somebody needs to.
Okay, there you go.
You know me.
I know that with the resolutions, they're new goals, new ideas, but those always bring challenges. And one of the things we faced with that most districts have never had to face, and that's with the tornadoes that ripped through Garland and Rowlett December 26th. I know you were celebrating with family in Oklahoma. How did you find out that this happened, and what was your first thought?
Well, as in everything is, immediate. The moment that the weather started saying that there was going to be severe weather, I started getting updates. And then I had friends that were actually filming the TV coverage on the news they would actually film what was going on the TV and send me a video clip of it. So I was getting the same updates that you were getting. And then I saw the picture. I think one of the more famous ones, I think, is where the lightning, it's kind of that strike in the background. You see the tornado as it's about to hit in the Garland Rowlett area. And so saw that, everything was immediate as it was happening.
You said immediate, and that's one of the things that it was really interesting to watch play out, is a lot to do with the relationships we have with all of our cities. And of course it touched down initially there at Bush and I-30. And almost immediately, the City of Garland called our Director of Transportation, Brian Abbott, and we were able to get 3 school buses over there and kind of start the process of getting some of those victims and some of the displaced folks there at the interstate. I think we got them into some structure in some places with the city. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship and how that helped us throughout, just not only with our parts, but with what they needed as well?
Well, I think if you look at it from the standpoint, let's talk about Garland and Rowlett both, because we were kind of getting hit at the same time from both cities for different needs. I think Garland initially, because of that, I think the apartment complex that was hit was thinking that they may need a bus to transport some individuals that could have been injured. And so probably within 45 minutes to an hour, we had buses there staged, off-site, ready to act. And those bus drivers stayed there till 2:30 in the morning on call, basically. Luckily, they didn't need them, and so that was good. But between that 7:30 and 2:30, I've had conversations with Encore. We need a staging area at Rowlett High School. Everything happens immediate. They want to know if they can have access to the schools. People are going to need a place for shelter that night. The schools are opened up immediately. Even the schools that didn't have power, so the people in the neighborhood could use the restrooms, the facilities, those kinds of things. So it's one of those things where I always look at it this way. People always talk about the public schools. Public schools are owned by the public. We are the caretakers. And so if there's something like this, why wouldn't the public school open its doors to take care of the public? That's the way I look at it.
We did that at Stedham Elementary. That's one of the initial staging areas. We had Red Cross out there. I know we opened up Garland High School to showers and to folks to come in and clean up. I know a lot of volunteer workers. We got them out there at Herforth. And like you said, that was through all those partnerships. And one of the things that I was really intrigued with watching it unfold was the geographic information system. I know that's something that you've really bolstered in the last 3 years with Jess Hudson really expanding that department. And just to watch how they took the overlays from the appraisal districts and worked those into the parcels and were able to find out how many students lived in those houses and where they attended school. Talk about watching that unfold.
Jess has done a great job, and he transitioned from maintenance to the GIS. And for those out there that may not understand what GIS is, it just basically maps where every student lives in the district. So when we found out what the damaged area was, and we took the damaged area, overlaid where we knew the students lived, we could identify very quickly how many students, what grades they were in, what schools they attended, And by the level of the damage, we knew that certain houses were absolutely destroyed, and as it get further, as the damage got further away from the clear path the tornado took, then you would get to what the city claimed was, these are majorly damaged, partially damaged, and slightly damaged. And so it kind of gave us an indication, which is what we needed to know, because we have to gear up knowing that school's going to start back in less than a week. We have to locate these students and get them back in school.
And that was a challenge for a lot of folks who don't realize the complexities of having a choice district. The path was clear, but I think we identified up to 60 different campuses that had at least one student that had been impacted in some level.
And some of those parents drive their students to the schools. Now we had, I think, 21 different bus routes in that area to a multitude of different schools, because you would have a student in a neighborhood that went to this magnet school or this other magnet school, or this high school versus that high school. Now the majority of the students in that area went to Rowlett High School, but not all of them.
Those bus routes you'd mentioned, Brian Abbott had his hands full in the as Director of Transportation, and we really, it was horrific that this occurred, but the blessing in all of it was that we had a week to prepare. And Brian was one of those who had a large task in figuring out the temporary bus stops.
Correct. I think the amazing thing, if people think about this, so like you said, I was in Oklahoma on the 26th. It starts icing and snowing, so I'm kind of stuck there for at least 48 hours before I could get back here, just from safety standpoint. All this is going on. Everybody's coordinating things. People are in different states. All the coordination's taking place. There's boots on the ground here with amazing people. And you didn't really have to ask people. They just came in. They gave up their holiday time and said, okay, it's time to go to work. And they just didn't go to work for one day. We had security at Stedham. We had some security officers that put in 100 hours over the course of a week, because they worked long shifts. And they just put in the amount of time it took to get the job done. And you don't get that in a lot of places. And I think that's the nature of people who dedicate themselves to schools and to education and kids, and you see that in a time of crisis.
Babette Hemphill is another one, Student Services. Their group was heavily involved. We put together a phone bank and an online form and questionnaire. We had 15 phone lines in the technology department, rather. Babette and her group kind of oversaw that. Talk a little bit about how the phone bank worked.
Well, I think one of the great things about the phone bank is the very first day, we didn't really know what to expect, and we didn't really have time to ask for volunteers. We just had to call people and say, can you come? And they did. They just volunteered. And then we put the word out through Twitter and different places, hey, if you want to volunteer, come and sign up. We had retired teachers, current employees, parents, patrons, board members. 2 or 3 of my board members that I think Charles Axe, Larry Glick, and Miss Cantu, all 3 were there answering the phones at times. And I think what that shows is it does take a lot of people, but when you ask, it was amazing how many people were willing to step up. We actually had to turn people away, just like when the communications department did a great job of tweeting out what the needs were for the students. How long did it take before Lakeview Centennial was full and Brandenburg was full and North Garland was full, and we finally had to tweet out and say, please, we have enough, stop giving as much in certain areas, because we can't possibly give away as much as you've given us, and that goes to the community in the Tri-Cities.
And a lot of this, you grew up in Oklahoma. You were there, like we talked about. I know you still have, you've got superintendent friends up there. You called, you got some ideas from them. A lot of this was, you're just kind of confirming, hey, here's what we have in place. Is there anything that you might advise? What did you gather from them? What sense in your conversations might they have said, this was good? I mean, what did you guys figure out that they can now take back in Oklahoma?
The person I called was Robert Romines, and he is the superintendent in Moore, which is my hometown where I grew up. And if anybody follows tornadoes in Moore, you can go back to 99, 2003, 2012, like 13, and then this last year or something. They've had 3 or 4 in the last 15 years kind of take the same path through the town. And they've lost multiple schools, and even had one of them hit when students were there and had many students die at a school. And so they've had a whole lot of different issues. So what you do, you reach out to people who have done it before and say, what are the things that I'm not seeing? I laid out everything that we've done, and he said, the phone bank's great. Well, everything that we had laid out was exactly what we should have been doing. One of the things that he suggested, because we already said we're doing the temporary bus stops, that kind of stuff, he's the one that gave me the idea of having one of our executive council staff, myself and 17 other people, went to the bus stops for the first 4 days, just to make sure that the kids got on the right bus and communicate with the parents. And and my first day at the bus stop, the parent was a couple minutes late, had to turn the bus around, come back and get the child, because that student was actually going to Garland High School. They're in the IB program, but they live in Rowlett. And so it wasn't, and so that was one of the best takeaways that we had talking to him. But the staff did such a good job in the planning. Most everything that he had said, everything except for that, we had already planned for.
The things we take away and learn from, I know that we drill regularly for lockdowns, lockouts, evacuations. Pat Lamb, you'd mentioned his security guys put in a lot of extra effort. They're going to work through some of these drills and make sure we get all of those in place quicker, and a few more than we had already had planned over the next few weeks, aren't they?
Absolutely. And one of the things I always encouraged when we talked about with Pat about the drills is, let's make sure it's a nice sunny day when we do the drills, because, and just to the parents that are listening to this, just know if your child went through this, having grown up in Oklahoma through numerous tornadoes, and I was there in '99 when the tornado hit Moore. I lived there. The children will react differently the next time the skies get dark. They will just naturally get antsy. And so as a parent, just know that, and know that they may react differently the next couple days after. And that's when I would say reach out to the school counselors and let us know if you notice any kind of change in them, because we have counseling right now for students, but some students will not show any adverse effects to that storm and that tornado being, we heard stories where kids were under, in bathtubs, or kids were under the stairways and things like that, and they seem perfectly fine right now. But yet, 2 months from now, they may need help, and what I'm telling you is we're here to help them.
In long term, we knew that it was not going to be done the day everyone returned to school on that Tuesday. And you mentioned counseling. There will be ongoing help and assistance for students within the counseling world, won't there?
There is. We have light counselors that went to the schools immediately. We've actually reached out to the principals at the 3 primarily affected elementary schools in that area and said, what additional help do you need? And each school is different based upon the number of kids that were displaced. And we still have around 200 kids that we are going outside of Garland and getting and bringing to school every day through transportation. A lot of people don't realize that. The moment they lost their home, they become homeless, and there's a lot of things that go with that. And one of them is transportation, counseling, free breakfast, free lunch, until their families get back on their feet. And so we're working individually with each school to make sure that happens.
Well, Dr. Morrison, we appreciate your time. I'm sure our viewers do, and we'll get together soon and do another round of this.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.